Hey, Book Dragons! It is your girl Lindsay here from the Spine Bookcast, Chronicles of a Bookshop. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Spine Bookcast, Chronicles of a Bookshop. We are so happy to have Ed Zinkiewicz, and I always mispronounce your last name, and I apologize. Please correct me. How are you doing today, Ed?
I'm doing fine, and I think you did a fairly good job. It's Zinkiewicz.
Zinkiewicz. Great. Good. So, talk to me about how you got into reading.
How I got into reading. Oh, my goodness. That was long ago, far away. How I got into reading. I don't think it was anything special. I don't recall doing it overly early. I don't remember anybody remarking, boy, he learned how to read soon. So I imagine I did it like the rest of the folks in my school. I just sort of picked up on it as things went on and found it fascinating and just kept on doing it.
So, was there a particular book for you that stands out in your mind that was the, oh my gosh, reading is for me? Absolutely. I love reading.
No, but there was a couple of people in my life that encouraged exploration. For example, we had a small town library, and Mrs. Pierce, one of the mothers of a student in my class, was the part-time librarian. And she was always eager to talk to you about what was new and what was interesting, and tried very much to find out things you were interested in. She got me started. Okay. So that was more important than any one particular book, I think. Minister played the same role later and encouraged me to read anything I wanted to. And, you know, he didn't have a particular
Go ahead.
He didn't have a particular vote in this in terms of what we were reading, but there at the time there was a phase among the junior high kids of reading science fiction that had to do with UFOs. And we were all just wondering whether we were all just wondering whether any of that stuff was true, and it was the discovery or promotion of Roswell and on, and we were just fascinated and just sort of read everything we could, and that turned me into a lifelong reader of science fiction, and that's the genre that I still go after today.
Do you have a particular science fiction book that you love the most? Is there one that's like your favorite go-to?
Well, early on, one of my most favorite was a book called The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. That was written by...
Oh, okay. Who's that by?
Yes, that was written by Robert Heinlein, and he was a prolific science fiction writer, and in particular, he wrote a series for a juvenile audience. So he had teenagers that were saving the colony on Mars and on, and The Moon is a Harsh Mistress has to do with a prison revolt. Now, the prison is...
Oh, wow. Okay.
The prison is the moon. The Earth was shipping off all their recalcitrants to the moon, which was a one-way trip. Because of the difference in gravity, you couldn't come back to Earth and be able to walk again. So anyway, that did it for a very long time. And of late, however, the last 20 years, I think I've been following an author called David Weber. David Weber writes
Okay.
all kinds of series, and the one that really is captivating to me is the Honor Harrington series. Honor Harrington is
Okay.
Horatio Alger in space. She grows from
Oh,
yeah,
fun.
she grows from
I love Horatio Algernon.
yeah. Well, she had her first hyper capable command, which means that the ship she was captain of could go faster than light. And anyway, she grew from a very small ship and saved a nobody ever heard about it planet. And just her career just grew and grew and grew and
Ooh.
grew. And, she became an admiral and advisor to the queen. And, just there's 18, I believe it is, 18 books in that series. So,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
oh, wow, it's exactly right. But I would sit every year. I would try to read it as slowly as I could because I knew it was going to be almost another year before the next one came out. And so anyway, yeah, that's
Sure.
and then he's had several other series, two other series. One very small, and then another one about a planet that had to regrow technology from scratch, and that was interesting. So
Okay.
I love the concept of being somewhere else in a different environment, trying to beat the bad guys, and I like epic space battles, and you know Flash Gordon, and were the heroes I grew up with.
I love that you said Flash Gordon.
Yeah,
Flash Gordon is one of my best friend Jess's favorite movies, and we both love the band Queen. So the fact that they did the whole soundtrack for that movie just makes our whole day.
yeah, yeah.
um, have you read The Martian by Andy Weir?
Yes. Um, I'm trying to remember. Is that the one they made?
That's the one about the guy who gets, yeah, that they left him on
Yeah,
Mars and they have to get him back.
yeah. Yes, I did, and
Well, and then Andy Weir's also written. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was impressed that he was able to start his own farm, and as distraught as anybody, I
Right.
believe a storm came up and wiped out his vegetables, didn't it?
Yeah, a storm came up and blew a hole in the tent and it let in all the cold air and it absolutely froze everything rapidly.
Right,
So yeah,
right,
there was a bit of a devastating moment.
right.
But then so I also have read Project Hail Mary, which my husband and I both listened to on audiobook, and it was absolutely fantastic. And they're apparently going to make a movie out of that, which I'm really excited about. And then there was also Artemis, which of the three books that he's written, Artemis was not my favorite, but I love Andy Weir's books because I think that he brings in a level of humanity and kindness to his characters in space. Have you ever thought about writing your own science fiction story?
No, I never have. I'm not very good in terms of thinking up plots and people, so I've never tried my hand at
Mhm.
it. Well, actually, I did. I wrote 3 pages, and I didn't know where to go after that. So it was like, oh yeah, okay, this is not for me. I had it's
Gotcha.
always interesting to me that these people invest countless hours in creating a detailed universe that they can draw on for detail. So, I mean, the Honor Harrington series with 18 books, you got an extremely large cast of characters. and other science fiction writers sort of joined in the game and started writing other honor-verse books. So there's well over 20 where people
Sure.
collaborated with Weber or wrote another book. And there's even an anthology of short stories written by a series of science fiction authors about different elements. So one of the characteristics of Honor Harrington is that she is friends with a tree cat, which is a native to the planet she was raised on, and
I'm sorry, a tree cat?
tree cat, Tree. It's a
Okay.
six-limbed creature. In any event, um, some of the stories talk about how Honor's great something like that grandmother first encountered tree cats and bonded with one. And so, it's got
Okay.
background stories of her family and on and on. It's just very interesting that you could put all that stuff
Sure.
together. What were all these planets like? Who were all the people? What was going on at the time? How did it fit in the history of what's going on now? And that it wears me out just talking about it, let alone dreaming it up, so I could write a book about it. So no, I think
Right.
I'll stick with what I'm writing now.
Well, and so what you wrote was Downsizing Made Easy. Tell me a little bit about that book. Like what is that? Because you did write a book, and I'd like to definitely get into that.
Yes, I've written 4 books. There's
Okay.
the first 3 were I call the Retire To series, as opposed to retire from,
Okay.
as opposed to retire from. So
Sure.
what happens is that we often think about retirement as getting out of work, and if you do that, you sort of get stuck and you run into problems because you don't have anything to retire to. So your
Right.
retirement is kicked off into a lame start without a plan or boat to paddle in, and so you don't work very well. So these 3 books deal with issues that are common to most everybody that's retired. It's find purpose, make friends, and keep up. Be physically able through your aging.
What kind of issues does it cover? Can you go into that for me?
Say what?
What kind of issues do you touch base on in your
Well,
books? Can you go into some of that for
yeah,
me?
the three issues is find. The first one is retire to play in purpose, and so it talks about how do you find new meaning. And the deal is that most of us, when we leave work, we leave something behind that it turns out we miss. Some people actually miss the work. They
Okay.
like the bricklaying. Other people could care less about the work, but they left their friends back there. If you think about it, you saw those
Sure.
people every morning. You waved at them. They waved at you. They asked about your kids. You asked about their wife. Da 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 da. And you had companions and friends at work. When you turn around and leave, you're leaving all them behind. And many people in this day and age
Right.
don't have other friends to make up the slack. So that day you can miss friends.
Okay.
And so one of the books is Retire to Great Friendships. It's how do you go about finding a new community to relate to when you don't have people walking through or by your office every day anymore. People just don't come
Right.
off the street and walk through your living room and you can say hi to them. So what are you going to do about that? Another thing that you can miss when you leave work is creativity or structure. Some people need the boss telling them to get up in the morning so that their day has meaning and or at least an outline. A lady told me once that if
Right.
I didn't have to go to work, I'd stay at home in my jammies all day, and that wouldn't be good. So when she retired, she had to make a plan for what excuse she had of getting out of the bed tomorrow so that she would, in fact, get out of bed. So you miss these things you don't even know you have in work. So that's one of the issues. The second book was on friendship, and
Gotcha.
the third book was Retire to a Better You, and that's about physical ability. It's two parts. When
Okay.
I was most of my career a professional couch potato, my mom said you have a choice. You can work with your brain or you can work with your body. And I chose my brain and just plain left out the body. And so I was most of my life I was the least fit and last chosen. So I didn't really have any physical ability. And I decided that I needed to
Right.
turn that around when my grandson was born. I didn't like what kind of image I was giving him as a grandfather. So I started exercising and nutrition watching and all that good stuff and turned it around. And so that's the
Sure.
first half of the book is how do you turn that around? How do you get going after from a dead start, literally? And the
Right.
second half of the book is for people who've already had the start and have maybe or have done that all their lives. What do you do in retirement that's different physically? And basically, what it is you need to shift into high gear because one of the truths about retirement is that aging takes time, and that means two things. One is
Sure.
that you're going to take 20 to 30 years in retirement. If you live to retirement age, chances are your life expectancy is 20 to 30 years more. And that is an
Okay.
extremely long time. And the only way to get through it is if you are physically able. The other thing is that
Right.
as we get older, we have more and more challenges just to keep up. And so you're going to aging takes time means that in that case that you're going to spend more time taking care of yourself because you're aging. And so
Gotcha.
those are the
So,
three issues in that book. Those books.
mhm. What would you say in your biggest response to writing those books and people that have read it? What has been like your biggest takeaway, like people's takeaway when they talk to you about your books? What do you hear a lot from your readers?
That's a surprise. Some of those things are a surprise. They recognized
Yeah.
they recognized they didn't feel like doing much in the morning and didn't know why. And
Uh-huh.
and it sort of hit the nail on the head to them that there's values in working that have nothing to do with the fact that you're laying bricks. And so it
I can see that.
yeah. So for you, if just watching you from the outside, I'm guessing that meeting people and being a positive influence on them reading more is it gets your juices flowing in the morning. And you wouldn't do that if you
It really does.
yeah, you wouldn't do that.
No, because it's definitely work.
Right.
No, it's definitely work, especially when you're talking to people and they come in, and a lot of times people are like, I like this, but I don't really know what to. And I always try to point them to local authors, and I try very hard to read as many of the local author books as possible so that if someone does come in, I can say, "Oh, you would really like this." Like, for example, if you are not an author and you just came in the store and you said, "Oh, I like sci-fi." I would definitely recommend like Dan Adams series, the Leaving Earth, New Home, and the Rift series, which is an amazing sci-fi series, or Laura Brewer's series, which is also a space. So I really like asking people, well, what do you like to read?
Right.
And then once they give me, oh, I like this or I like this, I try really hard to be knowledgeable enough that I can say, oh, you would like this author or you would like this author. And I read so ferociously myself. I'm constantly in the middle of 4 or 5 books at the same time. And that includes audiobooks and my Kindle and physical books. But that's what makes me happy.
Right.
And, I grew up saying, I really want to be friends with authors. And, everybody's like, okay, yeah, whatever. But I mean, here I am. It took me 45 years, but here I am being friends with authors, reading authors, and doing all kinds of things that promote reading, which is what I've always been passionate about. And I like too that this is not something I will retire from. I don't want to retire. I want to come in even when I'm 95 years old in my little walker. Oh, I know what book you would really like.
Right. Right.
The line I was born on a reading list that I'll never finish. That is absolutely me.
Right. So you get the notion, and some people don't
Yeah.
don't connect that kind of passion with the work they had until it's pointed out to them. So yeah, that was important, I think. Other reactions was, well, duh. Yeah, I get it. And so it was a sort of a
Sure.
non-reveal. But so anyway, that's how those came about. The newest book, Downsizing Made E-Z, my wife and I just
Mm-hmm.
moved from our home of 46 years to a much smaller apartment. It was like one third the size,
Sure.
and we needed to downsize. And so we knew we were going to have plenty of time to do this. At least that was the plan, because we were moving to a retirement community, and the wait list was like 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Oh no. Okay.
we decided that instead of trying to get rid of everything at once, we had a whole attic of inherited goods, scrapbooks, pictures,
Okay.
envelopes, letters, diaries, history writings.
Oh wow.
And she
Uh-huh.
got those from great people through her mother and then father and then us. And so we knew
Okay.
if she was going to do anything with that stuff, and she wanted to, but it was going to take some time to do that. So we decided we'd start small and deal with the issues, in a small way. Well, when we started doing that, we signed up for moving in here. We had 5 years to go, and so we decided that we would do a kind of a weekly schedule. My wife invested a little more time than I did, but for me, what it meant was Thursday afternoon, she would have rounded up 3 or 4 things to do in the attic primarily, or someplace else where we were putting things together.
Gotcha.
And then Friday, they would be all sort of stationed in the house where we could go get them and put them in the car and go deliver them. So we'd make a trip to.
So most of what you're writing about is post-retirement and how to still have a very fulfilled life even though you're not working somewhere. There's more to just working.
That's right. And since I retired, I started working with people doing coaching about retirement and helping them get through that transition from work to engagement, and trying to So I've
Okay.
done a whole lot of things. I've recorded and posted a lot of webinars. I did a 100 episode podcast series
Hmm.
on volunteering. I've done a whole series of things to help people meet the challenge of retirement. I hadn't moved before,
Right.
however, until, the last time we moved was 1973. So we had a
Moving has just, oh,
we had a house full of stuff.
moving is a bear that, like, I told my husband when we moved into this house, I was like, I'm going to die in this house. I don't want to ever move ever again.
Right. And a lot of people just don't. They don't want to leave my home. I'm not leaving my home, period. Well, the truth of the matter is, sooner or later,
Sure.
something's got to give because you can't keep up. And that's
Right. Right. No, I agree.
a basic reality that if faced early, you can come up with creative and adventurous ways to solve the problem. But if you leave it to the last, you're in trouble. And one of those things that you can leave to the last and give you a heartache is moving. If you decide,
Oh, yeah. It's,
if you end up in your house and you fall and you can't do anything but go to a nursing home, then you're not even going to get to participate in what's going to happen to all your stuff because you're
oh, gosh.
yeah, you're physically unable to do that, and so somebody else has to do it on your behalf. Now,
Yeah.
is that fair to your kids? So we've had a plan for 30 years that we would, around this
Uh huh.
age, the age we are now, around then, we would probably have to make some kind of transition. And lo and behold, the age showed up, and here we are. We got an invitation to move here from a very good friend, from very good friends who were
Uh huh.
on the waiting list and expected they had been on the waiting list for 3.5 years and expected to start getting calls about come see this apartment and see if you like it. And they said
Right.
we're going to have a
I
good
think that's,
we're going to have a good time. Come join us. And that sort of
yeah.
spurred our interest. And since the timing was right and it was going to take 4 years to get in, we decided, well, yeah, let's put our name on the list. So anyway,
I think that's really interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, we knew that we were going to move. When we signed up to
Sure.
go on the waiting list, we expected it to be 4 years. But so what I did was, I'm really
Right.
curious. I will let's see what happens. I will keep a list of everything that leaves the house. And so if we
Okay.
one Saturday, I had a tech sale. I don't know about you, but I've had an extra microphone or headset or
Yes.
sound this, sound that, technology.
I'm literally sitting here looking at a box of electronics that's just been sitting there for probably 6 months. So I
Right.
totally, I am right there with you.
You get the idea. So I had a sale and I invited all my friends to come over one Sunday afternoon and browse the techie thing. And so one of the items on the list was get rid of the old tech. And it listed several things in there
Sure.
so that if I ever wondered what happened to that telescope, I would be able to find it and say, oh, yeah, okay, I did give it away. We didn't lose it. And so I started keeping this list. And then that sort of became curious because it got longer and longer and longer. So when we were actually, by the time we were actually shown an apartment here, I had give or take 100 trips on that list. So one trip was
Oh, wow.
a car full of what my wife calls horsey gear. She was an avid rider for 50 years. And so she had saddles and
Oh,
tacks
wow.
and tack boxes and helmets and clothing and jewelry and pictures and
All the horse
books,
stuff. Yeah.
enough to stuff our SUV and haul it off. So that was a trip. So you get the idea.
Sure.
And it's interestingly
Yeah.
enough, despite the fact that we did that for a whole year, unless you had lived with us sort of continuously, you wouldn't have noticed that things had disappeared. You have
Right.
that much.
I think it's really interesting that you mention like all this stuff that you get when you get to a certain age because I have my grandfather's desk, cuz my mom and my cousin Matt didn't want it.
Right,
I have several pieces of antique furniture that are pieces in my family that I've had for years. Like I have a bookcase downstairs that my great great grandfather or my grandfather, I can't remember, maybe it was great great great, but he built it himself
right.
from the wood like planks that he had from his old house. So
Wow.
when I tell you that this thing is a massive sturdy bookcase, but I love it. But also I understand looking around the room, there's a bunch of stuff that I would not be able to take with me. Who am I going to give it to? What if my daughter doesn't want it? So this idea that, oh well, it's an heirloom, you have to keep it. I
Right.
think that's somewhat antiquated because maybe your kids don't want that stuff, you
Well,
know?
yeah,
And
I've been writing about this now. Keep in mind, I study retirees, and so I knew
yeah.
that in general, kids don't want their parents' stuff. Um, and so keeping
I want some of it, but not all of it,
that's
you
right.
know?
So, keeping that silverware to give to your daughter or hold it for when your grandson gets married or that doesn't work. So, what we did,
No.
our daughter came over and Chris and Chris and she, the two of them got their heads together. And Ellen, our daughter, surprised us. She kept some of the stuff that we thought she would, but she didn't want a lot of stuff we thought she would, but she did want other stuff we had no
Right.
idea she was interested in. So, it worked out.
My grandmother did that. She had everybody come in and was like, just tell me what you want, and I'll put a post-it on it with your name on it.
Right,
So the biggest thing that I wanted was the bookshelf and books because I have all these incredibly antique books that are in my bookshop on the top shelf, and I don't let anybody touch them. They're just for display because they are old. But, that whole idea of just tell me what you want and everything else, I'll take care of it or I'll get rid of it or I'll sell it. But you tell me what you want. And when my grandmother passed away, we had literally so much stuff. And this was after we took what we wanted, right?
right,
You still had this massive house of stuff that nobody either had room for or unfortunately didn't want. And so you had this massive yard sale, and even after a 3-day yard sale there was still so much stuff.
right, right. That's You don't have
It's
any idea how much stuff you have until you have to move. And you realize
exactly.
sit down in your living room and look around. Each and every item you see, it has to be gone. Now, that is generally a
Ugh.
disturbing thought. um, anyhow,
Yeah, I'm sitting up here looking at my office as we're talking, looking at all of the books and the CDs and the pictures and the knickknacks and the Legos and oh god.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, don't tell my grandson you have Legos. That's just no, that won't work.
No.
Well, anyway, so there's a
That
couple.
my biggest problem is books.
Yeah.
That would be my biggest thing is books, vinyl records, and yarn.
Oh,
Because I became a knitter about 13 years ago, and I did not realize that collecting yarn and actually doing a project with the yarn are two very completely different books. The same, or they're two very different habits. The same thing with buying books versus actually reading the books that you have, two very different hobbies.
Yes. Yes.
And it's amazing. And I love that you've decided to write a book about that, because I don't think, I mean, you've got all these other people like the lady, and I can't think of what her name is, who wrote about decluttering your life, and if it doesn't give you joy, get rid of it. All my stuff gives me joy.
Right.
That's my problem.
Right.
But thinking of it from a retiree perspective, I think is really, really interesting, because I've never heard that before from the perspective of, you're retiring, you're gonna have to downsize.
Yeah. Well, somebody is, and a lot of people leave it to their kids. And one guy wrote a book. He's
Sure.
a man named Matt Paxton. I have an interview with him on my website. You can hear it. But he wrote a book,
Okay.
Keep the Memories, Lose the Stuff. And he was the
Love that.
lowest kid in the totem pole. His father, stepfather, and two grandfathers died within a year. And he got the
Oh no.
unenviable task of taking care of all their stuff. And that started him in a lifelong career of decluttering. And he does a series on TV of hoarding. And so he's Matt Paxton and hoarding.
Oh, I love hoarding.
Yeah, Matt Paxton and
I
hoarding.
love that show so much. Every time I watch an episode, I immediately start looking around my house going, I need to clean the house.
Right, right. But he says the reason you keep grandma's doilies is so you can remember grandma. And what you want to do is to tell grandma's stories and find a way to tell
Sure.
the stories. And so, that's a lot of what we did in the last 2 years. We wrote a Storyworth book. Are you familiar? Storyworth is a company. You can go pay them $100 and they will print a book for you. At the end of a year, they start sending you weekly questions that you answer. Who was your favorite?
That's so cool.
Who was your favorite elementary school teacher? What did you like most in high school? What was your favorite hobby? Why do you have that? Whatever. What'd you do on your 30th anniversary? On and on and on. And
I'm going to write that down. You said Storyworth?
Yes, one word, story and worth, WORTH, worth. There's a couple of organizations.
That's so cool.
There's a couple of organizations to do that. And we found that they'll print that book for you. Our son-in-law bought it for us for Christmas 3 years ago. And we started getting the questions and answering them. And toward the end of the year, we had to do a little catching up, but we found out that you could have, in a color book, you can have up to 300 pages. And we only had,
oh my gosh,
we had 150 or something. And we found out you could also put pictures in. So we put pictures in to illustrate different things.
Oh.
Then we found out we only had,
I love that.
We only had 200 pages and we had a whole 100 pages. What are we going to do with it? And we decided that we would tell stories about our home. So my wife told stories about why the great room was called the Great and what this picture was all about and where it came from. I told stories about how this house became a home. When did the driveway come in? Why did we put the front porch on? What's the business about the deck? Where did the carport garage go? And it was sort of stories.
Oh, I love that.
Stories about how our life evolved in that place. We raised a family in that home. We raised our grandson in that home. We had 2 careers in that home. There's a life full of memories in that home. And we wanted to capture some
I love that.
Some of it And so part of the reason we could let go of some of this stuff is we followed Matt Paxton's advice long before I ever met Matt Paxton, and that is tell the stories. So that's what we did. And it's sitting on the shelf in here. I'll be glad to sell you a copy at $101 and I'll make $1 profit. But it's,
I think that's a lovely idea.
yeah. Now, somebody asks us, who has your daughter read that book? And I said, I don't think so. So is she really going to read it? I don't know whether anybody will ever read it, but she will inherit it. And so we also have
Sure.
other books around. There's people, the Shutterfly folks, and people that print photographs
Yeah.
in books. We have probably a dozen of those that we've made over the years about this trip and that trip and this vacation, that vacation.
Mhm.
And
I did that with our wedding album when my husband and I got married. I created the whole wedding book on Shutterfly where you can like put up the backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. And so that's how we made our wedding album.
yes, congratulations. We did our 50th wedding anniversary in a book. My wife my
Oh,
wife wore her wedding gown that she was married in
oh Lord.
that her mother made.
I don't think I could do that with mine.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of funny because we were in at the time we frequented the Y and went to water aerobics and I got in the pool. What are you doing later? And I said we just had a reenactment of our wedding vows for our 50th anniversary. My wife wore her wedding dress, and they all had two ladies said, shh, don't tell that out loud. You know how nobody here can wear their wedding dress. That just doesn't happen. Apparently, some women outgrew it.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't.
Yeah. So
I
anyway,
think it's lovely that you guys are married 50 years. It gives people like me hope that I love hearing stories like that from people who've been married that long because I mean, you know, you grow up thinking, "Oh, I have to be popular and have all these friends and blah blah blah." But what it comes down to is you need someone to share your life with, and you need just a few people to witness your life, and you witness their life, and they are what builds your life and your home.
right.
You know, and I love that you guys have that. And the fact that you can get someone to write a book about that is just I absolutely love that because your great grandkids could read that,
That's
you
right.
know?
That's right. And we're sneaking up here in September. It'll be 58 already, and
Wow.
that's amazing to us. I look over my shoulder. I used to see years when I did that. A couple years ago, and 5 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Now I look over my shoulder and I see decades, and describe things that way.
Oh, wow.
20 years ago, 30 years
Sure.
ago, and it's sort of say what? It's
Yeah.
totally different. So anyway, so what we
Well, Ed, I want to say go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, I wanted to highlight a couple of the themes of the book that I think are important. Do you think that would?
Sure, go right ahead.
Well, a couple of things that we learned about
Absolutely.
a couple of things we learned about downsizing. We didn't learn from us. We learned from other people who did it. One of the things that I wit-
Okay.
One of the things I witnessed was my mother who downsized in a month. And we vowed we would not do that.
I'm sorry, she did it in a month?
1 month.
I don't think I could do it in a month.
She lived in her home
There's no way.
for 50 years. Now, what happened was that
Uh-huh.
she isolated she isolated certain things and had them moved to a 2-bedroom apartment. and she moved in there before.
Okay.
But yeah, she at the end of that move, she then had an auction. Everything she owned was in the yard or available for sale, and the last thing sold on the auction was her house. And
Huh.
at the end of the day, she turned to me and she said, "There goes all my pretty stuff." And it struck me, my mother was a very logical, very precise. I got this planned out. I know when the movers are coming. I know what's going to go where, and I know how that's going to fit and all that. And she didn't count on the emotional cost of leaving behind 50 years in that short a period of time. And so one of the things that
Sure.
we vowed not to do was to try to crash move. And that's what I offer
Oh
as an
no.
option. I give 3 different scenarios of how you can break up the move so that you experience loss in different ways. You are going to experience loss.
Hmm.
The point is
Sure.
how. And the book offers you
Yeah.
a choice about that. Another thing
Okay.
that people talk about is that I just got too much stuff. I don't know where to start. And so I offer a couple of techniques about where to start and what to start with. You can start with that cluttered room
Okay.
or the cluttered garage or the cluttered drawer. You can start by getting rid of
Sure.
duplicates. You can start by doing things that can be transformed. So you have all those kids' pictures. My daughter, for some reason, did not want all her artwork from the first grade. And so, what are you going to do with
My daughter doesn't either.
it? And my grandson didn't want his either, and his mom didn't want it. So, what are you going to do with that? Because my wife's, so we have an awful lot of pictures. So, I offer some ideas
Sure.
about what to do. And those are also ideas about where you can start right now. You don't have to wait for anybody to tell you you're going to go somewhere or you even have any place to go. You can do those things right now. The
Yeah.
And the third thing is that I have all this cherished stuff. I got my grandmother's. Well, let's see, it's my wife's in this picture. It was her grandfather's grandfather's clock. The works for that clock came from Skipton, England, just after the American Revolution War. And the case was
Oh wow.
was built here. What are you going to do with that? You sort of want to keep it in the family.
Yeah. No clue.
And all of that, we can't keep it in the apartment. So what's going to happen to it? You have cherished stuff. So you collect Hubblewear for your life. My wife had collections of bird statues and on and on and on. What are you going to do with it? And part of the deal is one of the things that you can do is that you can orchestrate what it is you get rid of so that you give yourself as much time as possible to get rid of the cherished stuff. So the first thing you can do is get rid of the stuff nobody wants. Nobody wants the old paint cans half filled with paint. Nobody wants the hard styrofoam. When you buy a TV, you buy also the styrofoam it was packaged in and the box you carried it with. Those are your responsibility to get rid of reasonably well. And so we vowed not to, in this move, not to contribute to the landfill. In other words, we didn't want to trash a lot of stuff. So we found a place that would take hard styrofoam, and I talk about this in the book. They literally take styrofoam in one end of the building and put styrofoam out in the other end of the building. They've taken all that stuff and they grind it up, push it together, and make new pieces that can be used over again. So, from our standpoint, we're not throwing it in the trash. It'll eventually end up in the trash, but not before it's reused at least once. So, anyway, that's get rid of.
Gotcha.
Are there's things in your house that you can take care of that will be make it a reuse proposition instead of end up in the trash? Second thing you can do
Yeah.
in sequence is that you don't have to find homes for everything yourself. There are other people that do that. So Goodwill finds
Yeah.
homes. We have a thrift shop that
Yeah.
took a lot of stuff too. We had
Hmm.
between my office, my wife's office, and the office storage cabinet that we had three collections of paper clips, staples, pencils, pens,
Yeah.
all of that junk that we had no need of so much of. And there's a place in town that will
Yes.
take office supplies and recycle it to teachers, for example, and recycle things for
Okay.
art supplies. So you can find places
Yeah.
that will actually find new homes on your behalf. And
Gotcha.
that's
Well,
all.
Ed, I definitely want to say it's been an absolute pleasure, but we are out of time
Whoops,
today.
sorry.
It has been a pleasure talking with you. And I appreciate you so much coming on the show and talking and hanging out with us. And I love that I have your book because it's unlike anything else that I have in the shop, and I love that. And if you would like to grab Ed's books from the Spine Bookshop, you can go to our website, thespinebookshop.com. And as we said last week, if you are feeling generous, you're welcome to donate to our GoFundMe because we are in the process of moving to a new building and we can definitely use all the support and help we can get. Ed, thank you so much for coming on the Spine Bookcast. And as always, Book Dragons, happy reading.
Happy reading to you too. Thanks for inviting me.